Okay,
Anything.
so as we've said before, I was for many years an environmental analyst with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection under the DEP. And I got to take great classes with two of the professors who signed the Kyoto Treaty. And when I decided to leave that illustrious career and become a biology teacher, I had in my head what I thought would be fascinating, much to my chagrin. And one of the things I thought was fascinating is because I related as a high school student walking into the first classroom, and we're still doing the French and Indian War, we're still going over United States history. You walk into the math class and it's back to algebra. But when you walked into science, they were starting to talk about cloning, things that you take for granted now, like Dolly the sheep, right? That was like a fictional thing that became real, and it fascinated me. So when I came into the classroom, I was of the belief system that everyone would find it as fascinating because it's ever changing. Lo and behold, that did not happen. And it still isn't happening. But as the point is, I think it comes to a major misunderstanding of what's at hand. And I think once we actually embrace exactly what you're made of, how could you not be interested in the stardust of what you're made of? So when you say that to any student, little or big, you find, or some adults, you find out there's a lack of understanding of who we really are and how this really works. So when it comes down to the atoms that you're made of, the fundamentals of physics, and we know the name Einstein and special relativity, says that matter is neither created nor destroyed. So when you lose a pet, or a goldfish, or an auntie, you realize that, wait a minute, those atoms disassociate, they pull apart. And what happens once they break their bonds? They go on to become something else. In fact, the air that you breathe, every breath you take, has about 25 sextillion atoms in it. And that means that the air that you're breathing is also Gandhi's air and dinosaur air and warthogs in Africa's air. So as you recycle, and you are made of recycled second hand, third hand, million hand, millennia. In fact, the atoms inside you are approximately 14 billion years old. Pretty good stand up, huh? But here's the thing. What happens to those atoms has to do with the chain. It's a big chain, right? So you're made of whatever your mom ate, right? So your mom had carrots. Those carrots grew in the ground. That ground actually got pooed on by a squirrel. That squirrel took it from a nut. That nut and those atoms go back, and you could trace their lineage to the very beginning of the Earth's time. The Earth, in fact, is made of the same stardust that you're made. You are made of that Earth. And here's the thing. This system's closed. It's a closed system, as far as we know. The universe, too. And we know that matter and energy are interchangeable. Special relativity, as far as we know. We're always learning in science. It's not like they lied. It's as we learn as humans with our meager brains, we find out more every day. In fact, you probably heard about forensics and DNA and catching a killer. These are things that weren't even a thing. They were in a book, teaching it in a classroom 13 years ago, but today, voila. So you have to ask yourself, what don't we know? Well, around the turn of the century in the 1800s, there was a movement, a spiritualist movement, that said, what happens when you die? What happens to your body? Where does that spirit that you are, the energy from that matter that makes you you, go? And there is a wonderful investigation at the turn of the century that had to do with William James, who was a psychologist, and there were many scientists actually putting their ring in that hat. And what they did was they started to go ahead and try to find out if there was a connection between who you are as matter and who you are as spirit. And it was science that actually tried to, and it was about Duke University, for instance, that name you may know. And there was probably about 50 years of investigation at Duke University until there was a blowout, and it was the person called Rhine who moved his laboratory across the street, and it still exists today, trying to find out if there is such a thing as telepathy. And if you go on to onto the internet and you look for .edu, .org, you will find out, don't use .com so much, you will find out that there are really great laboratory tests between rats actually using a kind of telepathy to actually mind read. And they've been able to jot it down. So what happened? What happened was science. Science started to get infiltrated by the seances, the people who wanted to be fraudulent. You'll find them today everywhere, right? You look onto the, I could bring some things up that were probably USA, but you would know that there are people who lie and people who debunk and do bad things, and there's instigators that are fraudulent. But what happened was science had to stand back and try to get rid of it. And one of the interesting books that are out there is a book by a University of Washington Pulitzer Prize winner named Deborah Blum, Blum. And if I'm saying your name wrong, Deborah, I apologize. And what she did was she wrote Ghost Hunters. Start there, because if you're interested in understanding how atoms make your cells, which only get regenerated every 7 months or so, and your cells make your tissue, and the tissue makes an organ, and the organ makes an organ system, and we go on into a community, and we go all the way to the biosphere, from the top of the heavens to the bottom of the ocean. You're going to find that you are part of, and have been part of, and are made of those atoms from top to bottom as a recycled unit that's probably 14 billion years old, and that you are part of the universe and there is no separating.
Whoa.
Damn, that's cool.
Yes.
Damn, that is so darn cool.
Yay.
That is so blasted
Yes.
fascinating.
Would you like some feedback?
Oh, sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
just
maybe,
say
or you could, if
I
you
can
ask some
open-
questions, yeah.
Maybe I can
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
questions.
yeah.
Okay.
Great.
How are
This is
you
a good one to ask
It's better
about.
now. It's a great filter.
Oh, Sharri, thank you. We all believe this. It was so wonderful to hear it from a scientist and to understand a bit of the history. But please, everyone, join me in the questions. What I really loved was that you made it understandable. You spoke really clearly and you kept your focus on the audience. You were amazing. And it was well concluded, like you had your thesis in a way to say that science
Suffers.
pardon me.
It suffers.
Yes, that's right. It got sidetracked, and but it probably, I would categorize this as inspirational, educational, and we want to hear more.
This was a draft, but I've been like thinking about this. So you said, do you have something? And I was like, I typed something together, but honestly, do you know David Suzuki?
Of course.
Okay, I love him. And I watch him, and I think that the problem is the breakdown. Because we constantly putting science down, because it changes constantly, people disregard it. Like, eat butter, no, eat margarine, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so as we find out more, if people would, I think, open their minds, one of the reasons the scientists couldn't is because they started being blackballed. They couldn't get jobs. And once they started saying, well, wait a minute, this could be true, and we know now, after Einstein, that matter and energy are interchangeable, we realize that they might be very, very well connected. And so it would make you think for a second, if the atom, this is way off the cuff now, but if an atom that has existed for millennium, billion years, could hold some sort of memory, let's just say it has an archaic piece, a trace, and you put all of them together, so you are made of dinosaur, and you're breathing Gandhi, and you're a part, pick an animal,
Yeah.
then you would actually have to be more fascinated and more interested in the world that surrounds you if you realize that they were your cousin,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
hundredth
yeah,
removed.
yeah.
But still, it really turns out that we are all interrelated. And we're also interrelated with what we breathe, what we eat, and where we stand. And people like to think, I think because of Christianity, a lot of it, right? Because if you listen to indigenous, you realize that they're very well tuned to what the earth has to say. I think once we divorced ourselves through science, which I meant well when I came in, I didn't understand why everybody wasn't fascinated, but I realized there's a breakdown in communication of what could possibly be. And once we bring that fascination back to the forefront, I think that we could wholeheartedly accept more of how we interrelate. I hope.
Yeah. And
I think it's the only saving grace.
This is so important. So important.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed that this is sort of talk, something you've talked about often, many times, maybe not in a prepared speech, but the ideas flowed from your heart, from your experience. So it's something that
It made me change my career from a nice, cushy job with a lot of benefits at the state to a hard job as a high school teacher and a
right.
chemistry teacher in a college. And here's what happens. It breaks because you bring your heart and your passion into it and just get right into the ground. And it is hard. You're, as a teacher, you're a psychologist, you're the nurse, you're the mother, you're the snack giver, and you lose like the audience because the audience doesn't understand. They're like, this is different now, and that's not what they said before. And it's coming from the knee. You have to tell everyone that you're part of something bigger than you. And it's not just the community of people or the little cute animals that you feed or the birds in the trees. You're actually, absolutely, physically made of them.
So what you're doing is actually formulating a story, making a story
Of
about
truth.
of you're framing it as a story
How do you
because
see
people respond to stories.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
you're wanting to you're in the process, you're wanting to tell this all as a story that will impart the same excitement and bring people back to that place of
So
wonder.
can I just add one?
Yeah.
Why I'm out here. So one of the things back in about 10 years ago, I read somebody's doctoral thesis. And what they were doing was they were trying to figure out, it's probably, I don't know if this is for, you might cut this. But what they did was they wanted to find out what they do on a farm when all the animals die. What do you do? How do you bury them? Well, it turns out they mulch them with hay and lime. So this doctoral, she had to wait for people to die and give their consent. And she put them in a barn and she put them on racks and she added air. And within weeks, like a month, they were wheelbarrow of dirt. And I said to my husband, I don't want to be cremated or buried. I want to be, and I actually did visit. You can also go and be laid out and have wild animals eat you, which is another way to get around, probably faster, but it was a little too tough. So
Interesting.
I was like, ah. So, and I did meet the guy that does that. But the thing is, I wanted to find out how I could become a wheelbarrow of dirt so I can get my atoms back out there so I can do it again. And that is a thing, right? You're not taking up space on the earth that's so needed. You're not like firing CO2 into the air that's going to be a greenhouse gas from a crematorium. You're not being buried in the ground, which is kind of murky. And so I was like, how do you do it? And this woman now, there's 3 centers now, but she started in the Washington state area. And now it's a big thing, a big unknown thing.
Really, that's really
So
leading it.
your story would also give support to that.
To get you back your atoms.
Yeah.
Don't you want to go back out and be a squirrel or a fish? Or don't you want your atoms to carry on?
Yeah.
Like you want to
yeah.
bury them in a casket underground and it's going to take forever.
I've got a question and thing. First of all, I wish I had you as my science teacher when I was in high school, desperately. And
The nicest thing you could say.
the atoms and molecules or whatever that are in me are all the same. They are me. Yes. What happens when you get rid of my liver and bring in somebody else's liver?
So here's the interesting part about that.
Yes.
All the atoms are made from the periodic chart.
Okay.
So every breath you take in is about 70% nitrogen. It's not oxygen like you think. It's a very little bit of oxygen.
Oh.
27% about.
Okay.
And the rest is other. Let's say other.
Okay.
And so it's the same thing with that liver. That liver. Now remember what I said about memory, right?
Well, yes. Do we see? Because people said start remembering things and they've got a different organ in them. Yes.
You're
Yes.
so
Yes.
smart. We can't get there today. But here's
Sure.
the thing, right? Because the science hasn't caught up because it has to grow. And there isn't money to grow that science. The money comes from the people that want big pharma, whatever. So there might, and I tell this to the kids because I want them to grow up and go scientifically study this somehow. Like get the funding, get out there, bring your mind to it because people tried this at the turn of the century and they got shot down, denied jobs, they left. Duke University kept it up because it's got money and it had that ability. For 50 years they tried. You know what I mean? There was a falling out. but there's still an independent laboratory right across the street. I believe it's called the Rhine Center. Don't RHINE, and they're looking into this. But because we have so many, I'm going to use the word naysayers, right? People who don't, you know, in the Cloud Atlas, I don't know if you know this book, but it says truth is singular, mistruths are the opposite, right? There's many. And so if we can't understand that science is evolving and there's going to be setbacks and forwards, and if we don't embrace the possibilities, we're stagnant. And that's where we are now, right? That's where we are now. And I feel like in some ways I failed because I couldn't get it out there far enough. I do have some successes. One of my students is at JPL right now, but I think that it's because there was a lack of imagination and understanding. And if we would start earlier and make it known like a story, that brought it together somehow, that would give it to the kids so they could, like a teething biscuit, just get their gnaws on it and get their molars broke through. They wouldn't be so ready to reject and be able to, like you just
Got to
did.
start young.
I know, I tried.
Really,
But honestly,
5 years old or something.
I started in the high school, went to the elementary school, to the middle school, because I kept thinking, where does this go? Like a thread on a sweater. Went down to the 4th grade, and I gave up. It's the parents. After 1,000 parent and teacher conferences, if you are going up to your student, your kid, and saying, don't worry, I was bad in science too, it happens all the time, all the time. You got to let kids see the wonder. And I think they will. I said, how could you not be interested in yourself? You're all interested in yourself. I see you all interested in yourself. Yourself is all of these amazing atoms. And they come right from the periodic chart. And they are recycled. And they're billions of years old. And it is the star. And when they say, oh, you're Stardust, kids are like, yeah, I'm just glitter and fairy. No. You are actually the elements that made the star, that came from the Big Bang, that are today, that are recycled, that were poop, that were dinosaurs, that were carrot, that were a whale. How can you not be fascinated with yourself in that sense? Essence.
And what do they say to that?
Can we go now? I don't let them go till the bell rings.
Yeah.
Everybody has to wait until I say, okay, go. No, but there are tons of kids that love it.
So-
And they say what you said. So that actually warmed my heart. I haven't heard that in years, since I retired. I wish parents will say that to me. I wish that you were my teacher. And I'm like, oh, that makes me feel good.
Yeah, good.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad.
We have our research. Now we can, but they're making interesting films about people.
Yes.
Understanding the heart
and all of a sudden they like, I don't know
They're
why, but I want
well
flan. I've never had flan. Like,
Yeah.
oh, my son, he
Yes.
loved. And I'm like,
Yes.
how can it not be
Yeah.
that the essence of a person is still? So they're doing things with quantum energy, right? They've been working with banks, relaying data using electrons and using atoms. And what they're finding out is that they can twist an electron here, and it can be in China, and it'll twist in the same direction.
Oh.
So we're getting there. It's just slow as fire truck.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.